Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And I hope that you guys have been having a good day so far. This afternoon, I have here with me the Prosecutor, Sandra Whitfield, who will be joining us to talk about the Prosecutor's Office, particularly its structure and operations. And with that, thank you for being on the program. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for inviting me and as a spokesperson for the Prosecutor's Office today.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. So, I'm thankful, glad that you are here. As we were talking off here, for example, I had the court manager who was here to last year to speak about the court and its process and structure as well. And part of that is because, we have several institutions on St. Martin that are basically kind of distant from the public. And, we have quite a diverse makeup. And, for me, it always helps to inform people about, the different institutions that play a very important role in the affairs of our society. So before we get into that, I'll just allow you to share a bit about yourself and how long have you been a prosecutor, but also in the justice field?
Well, in the justice field, I am working since 1996. I started as a court clerk. And after that, I became part of the team of the Prosecutor's Office in the Netherlands. And I also worked a couple of years as a legal assistant on Curaçao. And in the Netherlands, I became a prosecutor in 2007 and in 2019. So more than 2 years ago, I came to St. Martin as a public prosecutor.
Okay, so
yes.
a few years ago. Okay.
Yes.
And with that, did you have any prior knowledge of the island in particular? And
Yes.
what was your, being in the Netherlands for so long, moving to Ireland, which is very much different, what was your approach in, studying, the culture and so forth that you can, get acclimated and adjust basically?
Yes. Well, I have a family history concerning St. Martin.
Oh, nice.
Because my grandfather used to live on St. Martin and two of my uncles still live here. So that's my last name, Whitfield. It's a West Indies English last name.
That's correct.
My grandfather actually came from Seba and my grandmother from French St. Martin. So that's how I got connected with the island, of course. And I visited my grandfather also a couple of times on St. Martin. So I already knew the island. And it's not that I lived here before, but I knew on which island I came to work. And it attracted me from years ago to go and work on St. Martin or another Caribbean island. I also worked on Curaçao. So I know how it is to work and live outside the Netherlands because it's completely different. But I'm really enjoying living and working here on St. Martin and contributing to a safer society.
And what in particular has stood out to you, with the island?
Sorry?
What in particular has stood out to you since moving here and working here?
Well, the diversity of the island. You have all different kinds of nationalities. It's a really Caribbean atmosphere on St. Martin. I have to get used to the English language since, it's not my first language. But yes, it's a whole, sometimes when I drive around the island, I think, oh, actually I'm driving in paradise. It's a paradise to live on. Yes, and it's great to meet people on the island and see what's going on.
Okay, so thank you for that. And one of the things I noted is, as you said, you started out as a court clerk.
Yes.
And so for that, because basically, it is often perceived that, you have to have a specific background to, well, of course, have a legal background to become a prosecutor. But I guess overall, what is that process like? For us, we here in St. Martin, I've always said that we notice in our justice chain in particular, we have a lot of Dutch Europeans. We would like to see more of our people reflected in that sector.
Yeah.
So, for someone who is either studying law or a parent who may be listening, have a child interested in that, what is a process like of becoming a prosecutor? What are the steps you have to take to reach that level?
Yes. Well, we are working on to get more prosecutors from the islands to be a prosecutor on St. Maarten. So we now have our first OYO who has really completed his training, and who will be starting as a full force prosecutor. And he's the one also that's going to be staying on St. Maarten, because usually prosecutors from the Netherlands fly in for 3 years and maybe maximum 5 years, and then they go back to the Netherlands. And the reason for that is that it's very difficult to get prosecutors from the community, from the society, because there's no real law school at St. Maarten, so they usually go abroad to study law, and then they stay in the Netherlands. So we want to make St. Maarten and the islands attractive to come back to St. Maarten and the other islands and become a prosecutor here. So we have the OYO opleiding, that's what it's called. And then the requirements are that you have to study law school, and after that you have to get legal experience in like working as a legal assistant or some legal experience in the work field for like 5 years. And after that you can enter the training, and that takes about 2 to 3 years, and during the training you will be trained also at the courthouse and at police station, so all the different
the chains within.
The chains,
yeah,
yes,
gotcha.
judicial chains. And after that, when you're graduated, you become a full prosecutor. So actually this year we are looking for a second local prosecutor. That will be released this year.
Okay, so then they will just have to enroll for that training process.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that's pretty interesting. And how many prosecutors are there in total, and what is the legal amount that we need or require?
For now in St. Maarten we have 4 prosecutors like me, and then we have a chief prosecutor and also a solicitor general. So he basically deals with the court cases in appeal, and also
specifically. Gotcha.
So that's 4 regular prosecutors, 1 chief prosecutor, and 1 solicitor general. That's the basis for St. Maarten, and one of the 4 is the OYO, who will stay on the island and who's actually local. Okay. Yes.
And is that adequate enough in the sense of considering your case, your workload? Do you foresee the office having to increase the number of prosecutors, or is it fairly balanced at present?
Yeah, we were just talking about this yesterday with our colleagues, because it's enough for now, but when somebody gets sick, or maybe 2 or 4 go on holiday, then you have a little extra stress, because all the workload will you end up with 2 prosecutors that were left. So it's enough if everybody's present, but as soon as we are left with 1 prosecutor less or 2 prosecutors less, concerning circumstances, then sometimes it's difficult to get all the cases done, but we still do, of course. Especially when we have a week once because we switch between the prosecutors with on-call duties. And when you're on call, you have the whole week. You have to be on call. That means that the police will call you for all kinds of things.
One prosecutor specifically.
Yeah, that one prosecutor in that week.
Okay.
So all the cases that occur in that week will become your workload. And sometimes you have a quiet week, but sometimes you have a lot of crimes happening in that specific weeks. And these crimes stick to the prosecutor who has the 1 week on call. So if you have less prosecutors, then you are more on call, so you have more cases and more workload.
Understood. Okay, so that then clearly, of course, naturally shows that the employment capabilities. I'm thinking in line of careers,
Mm-hmm.
because while you guys are leading the cases, you also have a team
Mm-hmm.
that assists you. So what is your back office like, and what role do they play in assembling cases and the like, and assisting you guys overall?
Yes, we have assistants. Thank God, from our legal assistants. Some have a legal background, some not. Some have have a lot of experience in handling criminal cases, and they assist us in dealing with the police, making sure that the case is ready for court, and also assist us in discussing matters in how to prosecute or not prosecute a suspect. So they actually think or help the prosecutor with completing the case and making sure that it's a good case to go to court, or maybe not go to court if there's not enough evidence. So they help because they all have a legal experience. They help the prosecutor in that. And we also have administration who takes care of all the files and makes sure that everything is planned right and goes to the court on time. And is registered, and also takes care of register and to inform the suspect and also the victims.
Okay. With something you just shared, well, I have two questions for you. First one being, basically, how long can you sit on a case? Let's say, you have a case that, you're investigating, you realize this can go further, but perhaps there's not enough evidence, and so you kind of have to, it's on standstill. In a situation like that, is there a limitation to how long you can leave it unattended, or you would just have to totally shut it down?
Well, that depends on the case. Usually in cases where minor suspects are involved, you try to get the case finished as soon as possible, because it's important for a minor to know, when he did something wrong, that there will be repercussions, and not in a year, but in a shorter time frame. But in complex cases, it can take a while to gather all the evidence, talk to all the witnesses. The police has to do some investigation, or maybe the lawyer wants to have some investigation to be done. So that can take a while, but it depends on the case, basically. But when you have a case that is ready for court, then it can go really fast. But in more complex cases, like really violent cases, murder cases, well, it can really take a while to get it to court.
Gotcha.
Ready to court, or to make a decision if maybe a case has to be dismissed.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, one of the things I understood as well is that a police officer, in a sense, can be an acting prosecutor.
Yes.
How exactly does that work? What does that mean per se?
Yeah, it's called hulpofficier or acting prosecutor. It's not that he is really a prosecutor like we are, but he can make decisions in the investigation phase. He has to make a decision if a suspect, when arrested, has to be incarcerated for 2 days more. And after that, the prosecutor will step in and check if the suspect has to be detained for 8 days more. So the first contact the suspect has with the police, with the acting prosecutor, is first when someone is arrested. He has to be voorgeleid, they call it. So he has to be. He gets in a conversation with the hulpofficier, acting prosecutor. He will inform the lawyer. He will make sure that the rights of the suspects are in place. And also the acting prosecutor, when there is an incident that has to be dealt with immediately, then he can act as the prosecutor or call the prosecutor. Well, I have to do a house search right away. It's really urgent. It's a really urgent matter because of a firearm. And he can enter the house. Firearms, it's legally. It's legally instructed that he's allowed to, but in other cases he has to call me, and I have to call the judge of instruction if a house search can be done. But he has a big role in that, because also the judge of instruction can say, okay, I don't have time to go to the house right now, but I instruct you to go into the house and start the search.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. I appreciate that. Even with that, I guess, what is your relationship like also with other partners in the justice chain? I think you adequately detailed the police, like the police force, basically. But you have, for example, land researcher, TBO, maybe immigration and so forth. What is your relationship like with those other, those chains, those links in the justice chain?
Yes. We have a lot of in the justice chain and also outside the justice chain. We have a lot of chain partners where we deal with. Of course, the police, KPSM, they are the ones doing the investigation, and we, as a prosecutor, are leader of the investigation. So we have a lot of contact with them, of course. And besides that, you already mentioned Landsrecherche. We have contact with the Coast Guard, with Customs Department, with the Court of Guardianship, with SJB, so the Probation Office, with the military police, and also other like TEAT, VSA ministries, Safe Haven. Nou ja, Turning Point, a lot of
quite
partners we work with.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
that's true.
Okay, so even with that, basically, with what you detailed, one of the things that come to mind is, the prosecutor office. I remember last year it shared that there was quite a backlog in you guys receiving payments for, I think it was for fines.
For traffic fine?
Yeah, for traffic fines. So, have you guys been able to close that gap? But also in terms of funding, how is the prosecutor office funded? For persons who may not know.
Well, it's a misconception that we are funded from our own fines. That's not the case. We are funded from the Ministry of Justice as one of the organizations in the justice chain. And all the funding, the fines we receive go into the crime funds. And we are not the ones that can, get money out of the crime funds. So there are special conditions for that. So the big part of our gathered fines, etc., will be put in the crime funds, and we are funded from the Minister of Justice.
Okay. Yes. So
there's no Netherlands involvement in that. It's a local St. Martin.
Okay, and as you stated, you have no involvement with the crime fund. So who is responsible for that?
The Minister of Justice. Yes,
okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And I'm joined with Prosecutor Sandra Whitfield. So one of the things I would like if you can detail a bit more, as I mentioned, like the fines. You guys do collect those fines, traffic violations and stuff. But what are the other services you render, and what are the main tasks of the prosecutor office, the OM itself as well?
Yes. Well, the OM itself, the prosecutor is it is the leader of the investigation. So when a police investigation is being done, the prosecutor is the one who sets out what has to be happened or what not has to be done. And after the investigation is finished, the prosecutor is the only one who can decide if a case will be dismissed or not, or summoned to court or not. So that's the task of the prosecutor. When it's summoned in court, the suspect will get a summons that says, well, you're suspected of, car theft or something. And then he will go to court. And in court, the prosecutor will demand what has to be done with the case, what has to be done with the suspect. So how much punishment he actually should get. And after that, the judge decides which sentence the suspect will get. So we have also a role in court. After the verdict, the prosecutor's office is also responsible for the execution of the verdict. So to make sure that the perpetrator really gets his punishment. It can be jail time, it can be community service, it can be a fine he has to pay. So we have to take care of that. And we also mentioned we have a big role in our cooperating with our chain partners in all different kinds of fields. And we also have a role in protecting, making sure that the rights of the victims are being served. And also a role as, keeping the community safe together with the police.
Okay. So one of the things that you stated, if you can clarify, is that do you guys have a shared database as well?
Shared database with who?
So if you have a shared database, with all those institutions in the justice chain.
No, we don't really have a shared database, but in the justice chain, we can exchange some information. Like, for instance, the probation office, we can ask the probation office to write a report or about a certain suspect. And we can also ask the probation office if they already had contact in the past with the suspect and what those reports were, so we can, add them to the file. So we share information, but we're not. Like we cannot. They all have their different systems.
Okay,
to work with. Yes.
Okay, cool. So one of the things I also understand is, basically that our OM is part of the Attorney General's office, just like, same with Curacao, Bonaire, Saba, and Statia. So what input does the Attorney General, have in your operations or policies? And are you also, given your specific process in your region or district, do you also provide advice to Attorney General as well?
Yes, well, we have general policies for all the islands actually, but every island has its local problems and its local crimes they want to combat. So that's a little different for every island. But we try to, for the policy-wise, try to be equal in the sense that we are one OM Carib. So it's not only Sint Maarten, but we work together with the other islands. And there are work meetings in Curaçao. And we also give our assistance nowadays to Saba and Sint Eustatius. So we try to not only focus on Sint Maarten, but to broaden it to the whole region. So that, for instance, a suspect in Curaçao doesn't get a higher demand in sentence than Sint Maarten. It can fluctuate a little, but it has to be somewhat the same.
Okay, kind of uniform approach, basically. Yes. Okay. Yes. All right, understood. So with that, next question I have for you is, you spoke a bit about the victim support, and I also saw that, that services was initiated, and I'd like to get into that. But before I do, I'm also curious about the care that law enforcement officials, like a prosecutor, receives, even as far as counseling or mental health is concerned. Is there any such thing available, especially if you work, you work a high stress job and the like.
For us, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, when you have problems with that, you can reach out to the chief prosecutor and say, okay, well, I'm not coping really well with something. We don't have a special institution that takes care of the public prosecutor's office in general, but internally there are, like a vertrouwenspersoon. I don't know how you call it in English, but
I don't know. I could like Google Translate, I guess.
Yeah. So there are places to go, but we don't have a specific institution that only helps, the prosecutor's office. But internally, there's place to discuss this kind of matters if you're coping with difficulties or emotions at work.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, understood. So one of the things I'm curious about is what are the most common types of cases that you've worked on, but also in terms of as a body that you've noticed, a particular rate, whether increasing of a particular crime, a specific crime, or area of crime.
Yeah, well, I think it's alarming that there are a lot of cases where firearms are involved. So even if it's carrying a firearm in your car or I don't know where, or even having one at home, and also using the firearms against other people. So it becomes manslaughter or murder or attempted. So that is really a concern. Because it also has a great impact on society, and people don't feel safe, and other people are carrying around firearms. So that's why, the punishments for these types of crime are really high. And with the firearm use, you get the robberies, The Chinese supermarkets and other restaurants that are being robbed. That's all related to the firearm use. And besides that, domestic violence is still a hot topic and will be, I'm afraid. We are working.
So, you've noticed a spike in that?
Well, during the COVID time, a lot of people were, together in one home, couldn't go anywhere, losing their job, had problems with finance. So that increased the tension also at home. And we see a lot of domestic violence cases and also suspect reoffending. So for that, the Public Prosecutor's Office and SCAB, so the Probation Office, they started a project last year, and which is continuing this year with R4CR funding, and in our combat against domestic violence. And one of the issues we want to address is the behavioral training for suspects. It's a safe home training. So that means there's a specific training for domestic violence suspects in which they can try to see get the signals why they are acting aggressive, and also try to work on that, because until now St. Maarten didn't have a specific training for domestic violence offenders. And in this training also the victims will be involved, so they can build their relationship back up again, and also for the victim to see what can trigger the suspect or not. So it's basically a training for victim and offender, and it can be mandatory in a verdict, or it can be on a voluntary basis. So it's not necessary that the suspect has to be convicted. If there's a domestic violence situation, both victim and suspect can go to SCAB or Safe Haven to apply for these trainings. So I think that's a big step for St. Maarten concerning domestic violence crimes. And also in our project we have implemented, or it's a pilot, mediation pilot, not only for domestic violence cases but also other cases. And in these pilots, last year 10 cases, and this year 20 cases, criminal cases, will be mediated. This means that there's a crime has happened, and then the prosecutor has to decide, okay, am I going to court or not? But in the meantime, the mediation will take place. And then the suspect and the victim go to the mediator on a voluntary basis. And the mediator will try to get an agreement between those two, in which certain agreements can be made and signed for. And this mediation agreement then goes into the criminal file. So the judge and the prosecutor can take that into account. But it doesn't mean that the case will not be prosecuted, because it's only, a way to help to get two parties get together after the crime, so after the verdict, and and things are being discussed outside the courtroom, because we don't have time to set up a whole mediation setting at the prosecutor's office, but the mediator has that time and can talk to those people and try to resolve some issues that are maybe going on, like for years. Okay. And also if the mediator is not able to help them, she's not a therapist, but can also show them the way to where they can seek help.
Okay, I really appreciate that, because I guess that definitely shows the reinforcement that's needed in the links of the justice chain, especially with this particular issue of domestic violence, because that touches some deep social issues, It is, I do recall last year when the prosecutor office put out that press release stating, witness a spike in cases, which is unfortunate. But of course, as a judicial chain, you have your box, so to speak, that you work in, but then there are other organizations that can connect with you to realize a change in this area. And so and even in your response about the crimes or cases that you work on, so I noticed how you kind of centralize guns and the different elements attached to it. So I'm curious about how is that information dissected or further looked at As far as have you established particularly main areas, main ways persons get guns, and so forth, that could, I guess, work towards the limiting of, whether illegal importation of guns, illegally acquiring guns, with that information being fed to another partner in the justice chain that would have that lead.
Yes. Yeah, as soon as we get a lead for where the guns come from, we're trying to investigate that. So I think last year we had a case about a big drug trafficking case, but also trafficking of guns. So it's probably the case that the guns come from off island, but it's really not always easy to find out where exactly do the guns come from, and also the guns go to the French side, go off island there or come island on the French side, and but we have a good collaboration with the French authorities also on that, and a lot of times guns are used several times for several incidents. Yes, but it's a problem, and I think it's important for the community to also understand that it is a problem and it is dangerous and it's not being accepted. When you see a couple of cases where youngsters have gone to school with firearms or firearm lookalikes. It's not only the police who has to solve this whole situation. There's also the parents the school, the whole community to say, okay, this is not right. We don't want it for our children. We want to, we want the schools to be a safe environment. And it starts from little on when they're watching the gangster web movies and with the guns and the money. So it's all a whole mindset of that it's tough to have a gun but you don't know what the consequences are when you use the gun.
Yeah.
And also, if it isn't a real gun, then still it can be used to threaten people or commit robberies with it.
Yeah, and it can be a precursor to the actual thing.
Yes.
Because then you're already acclimating to the fact that this is something worthy of having, which isn't the fact.
No.
Or the case, yeah. Yeah, okay. So... you shared how you guys are also assisting victims and the like. But of course, I also know that you recently disseminated some leaflets and stuff.
Yes.
But how can you detail how you guys also reaching the different cultures on the island? Because you have specific culture groups that have their approach to, I guess I would say, privacy. And then language barrier as well. So what is your way of reaching out to victims, encouraging persons who have been hurt in any way, to seek that help, particularly where the prosecutor office can assist?
Yes. Well, according to containing the leaflets, we have leaflets in 3 different languages. So we have English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So that's a good start. Anyways. The victim's first contact is with the police, and without a criminal charge or without a complaint, oftentimes the police doesn't get it into action unless they'll be getting a call. Okay, something happened right now. The police has to come. So not in all cultures. It's for instance, for domestic violence. The victim will step up to the police and say, okay, I've been molested, I want to press charges. So that's true. So we have to have the cooperation with other, like Safe Haven, etc., to make sure that they get the help that they need. It's not always necessary to press charges to get a investigation and a prosecution ongoing, especially in domestic violence cases or child abuse cases. And as for the language barrier, Spanish is spoken at the police station, Haitian Creole maybe a little less, but we try to figure that out. We also have a translator in court. Sometimes it's difficult, but usually with English. English is the most spoken language on the island, so there are some exceptions. People don't speak English or Spanish, but
you made an effort to still reach that person.
Yeah, they have to feel welcome to go to the police or go to the prosecutor's office to file a complaint or think that their story is being taken seriously.
Okay. Well, you shared one thing just a little while back. Like if you can explain that a bit more as far as your relationship with the authorities on the northern side, on the French side. To what extent does that go? Do you even collaborate a bit in cases? Let's say if it's a crime that, or suspect that was, I guess, caught up in a crime on both sides of the island, or like you mentioned, firearms and stuff. So, like, to what extent is that collaboration? Where does it stop? What's the limit to that?
Well, we collaborate a lot because it's not the case that when a crime is committed here that nothing can be done on the French side or vice versa. It depends on the crime, it depends on the suspect. But we have a good cooperation with the French side, also exchanging files, exchanging, as for the car thefts are concerned. There's also a problem on St. Martin that cars are being stolen on the French side and brought back to the Dutch side to sell. But we can get the information from the French side, the charges, and then cooperate that in a case we have on the Dutch side. So that is being done. And about the car theft, well, there's also a big issue on St. Martin because a lot of cars are being stolen and then they are repaired, remodified with other VIN numbers, etc. So it's really important for the public to, when you buy a car, you really have to double check if everything is correct. Yeah. Because otherwise you will lose the car because it will be confiscated. You'll be sent to prison probably because you're accused of fencing.
Seen as
you lose your money, you lose everything. So please be careful with buying cars on the street. It's another thing when you buy it at the garage, but on the street, it's you have to be careful these days. These kind of cars. Okay. But the collaboration with the French is good. Yeah.
Okay. So. What is also, because I asked this question a bit earlier, which was, in terms of the fines and whatnot, but a challenge you guys have been having is in reaching persons, whether, they have changed addresses and whatnot. So how are you overcoming this difficulty?
Yes. Because our postal service is not optimal. A lot of letters, etc. The suspects and victims have to pick up at the prosecutor's office or get them by email. And we have our deurwaarder who will go house to house, and if there have to be some papers that have to be signed or some fines that have to be collected, or people have to be aware that they have to pay a fine. He will go door to door and look for these persons. But sometimes it causes difficulties, and also because people are leaving the island, and then the fine is not paid. But the fines are a result of the verdict of the judge. So the verdict stands, and by not paying, you also have the risk that you have to spend a couple of days in jail because of not paying the fine. That's the risk you take. So nobody wants that, of course. Yes, but besides the fine, you also have the community service that people have to do. When the judge sentences you to do community service for let's say 100 hours, you have to collaborate with the probation officers to fulfill these hours. And if not, you can also risk that you have to go to jail.
Okay. The one thing that, of course, takes place in some cases is electronic eavesdropping. Listening to persons or tapping persons' devices. Yeah. What is the guidelines? How do you reach to that point? What is a process as well? For you to get authority to do so, because of course I don't think you're just able to do so.
No,
because,
we're not able to.
What is the guidelines to get to that point if you realize you require the need to tap someone's phone, and also if someone's phone is tapped, does it kind of infringe on the person? Let's say if they're speaking to someone who's not on that list or being being listened to, does it infringe on their privacy rights?
Well, first of all, to tap someone, you have to have a serious crime. So, for instance, shoplifting or a minor crimes, it's not possible to tap someone. But if the investigation is, for instance, manslaughter, and we have a suspect we want to catch, we can ask the judge of instruction when we got the phone number of this person to tap this person to see if we can catch him, arrest him, to see if he talks about the crime, etc. There will also be other people calling in, but that's not useful for the file, so we don't use that information. We only use the information concerning the crime, or maybe some co-perpetrators he or she is talking with. And because the judge of instruction is the one in between, so we have to demand that the tap is being placed. That is so the court will check if it is a crime that can be tapped, and also if it's necessary for the investigation to use this kind of dwangmiddel. I don't know. This kind of measure.
Yeah, measure. Yeah,
heavy measure actually in the privacy, and it will also be for a couple of weeks the tap, and then after a couple of weeks the judge have to check again if it's still necessary. And we have to motivate as the police and the prosecutor's office why we want to prolong the tap.
Gotcha. Okay. So one of the questions that
I want to add something to that.
Oh, go ahead.
If they're speaking to the lawyer, then we cannot use that information. If it's about the case and they're speaking to a lawyer on the tap, and we hear that, we have to
annul.
Yeah, annul that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Attorney-client privilege. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the questions that usually a lot of people ask, whenever they see a publication coming from Prosecutor and stuff, is sometimes where the case of a person's initials may be published. And sometimes it can be a violent crime or a high-profile case. So can you explain why is that? Why that approach?
To put someone's initial in the press release?
Post like their full name.
Well, full name, I think we use the initials, but because someone is a suspect until the court says he has gotten a verdict, so he has done, or that's it legally and convincingly proven that someone committed a crime. And before that, he's still a suspect, so not everybody has to know who that person is. He has the right to have that privacy. But after the verdict, and when he doesn't go when he doesn't appeal the verdict, then it becomes a closed case, and then he is not only the suspect, but he committed the crime according to the judge. Well, that's the privacy part, but all the court hearings are public except for the minor suspects. Mm-hmm. So everybody can go to court and watch a court hearing and see who is the suspect, etc. And not always. The chairs are sometimes limited to access the court. But
nevertheless, what you're saying is public info. If you want
it's public info. There's also the journalist is attending the court hearing. So that should be public also, because people must have the opportunity to check if what the judge does is, if he does correctly, if it's independent judge who also takes everything in consideration during the court case. For the privacy, but on an island as St. Maarten, when you hear there was a manslaughter and you hear, okay, it's region, I don't know what kind of region, then you can put one and one together, and you know how gossip goes on St. Maarten. It's very difficult to hide who is in jail and who is a suspect in certain cases. So yes.
Classic case of melee. That's a local term, basically.
What?
I say the classic case of melee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. So another question too is, we've noticed that, like for example, in cases of murder, like the sentences in a sense are short, and I understand. So like in the Dutch system, there's no life sentence, but also sometimes a person would end up serving 15 or 20 years for murder, and I guess the public view is that you kill someone, that is kind of like almost a slap in the wrist, like a light sentence. So what goes into that, determining the sentence someone should serve, especially in such a case?
Yes. Well, of course, for the victims or the next of kin, no sentence can be enough for someone who murdered your daughter or mother or wife. That's for sure. There is a life sentence in our criminal code for murder, but the life sentence is not often imposed. It's usually in cases where there are suspects that have committed more than one manslaughter crime or murder crime. Then you get, you come in the reach of the life sentence. And actually the sentences on St. Maarten are higher than in the Netherlands concerning manslaughter and murder. But also we have guidelines. There are guidelines, so we don't have to be strict with the guidelines, but still they give us a direction in which what kind of demand we should ask or demand in these kind of cases. And also the court has somewhat the guidelines that they use, because we cannot have a murder case on St. Maarten where we demand and a judge sentence like say 25 years for one murder, and then on Curaçao they get only 15 years. So we have to have some island-wide guidelines in that. And yeah, it's a severe sentence, and the judge and the prosecutor don't only look at what happened, so what crime is being committed, personal circumstances of the suspect. For instance, when you have a suspect who is very young at age, maybe just reached 18 years, it's a different person than one who's in his 40s and already committed crimes, has a criminal record, is a violent person, or maybe a suspect is, not mentally challenged or not acting like a normal person. Then you have to take that in consideration too. So there are all different kinds of factors in a demand, but the biggest factor is of course that somebody died and somebody has to be punished for that. But it's difficult to establish demands in these kind of cases. So that's why we always, in these cases, discuss it with our colleague prosecutors and legal assistants. What can be the best demand in a case? Gotcha.
Okay, I appreciate that. So another thing that comes to mind is, for one, in our system, it allows someone to be held for questioning. But like that also, leads to a public condemnation if that knowledge is known. So in such a case,
what do you mean by allowed questioning? Or?
So allowed to be held for questioning.
Oh, held for questioning. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in such a case, is that one is the person's lawyer allowed to be there, and let's say you have someone who chooses not to speak at all, then. Do you just let them go, or do you prolong the sentence until they speak? What goes into such a scenario?
Yes, well, the suspect has the right to a lawyer, and has the right to, if he is arrested, to consult his lawyer prior to his questioning, and also has the right to have his lawyer present when questioned. It's not that the lawyer can interfere in the whole investigation questioning, but he or she can be present and maybe ask one or two additional questions to safeguard, that everything goes the right way at the police station. And the suspects have the right to a lawyer when they go to court. and if they're not able to pay for a lawyer will be paid for, assigned, because they also have duty. They're also on duty, the lawyers. So every week there's a different lawyer on duty. So when somebody got arrested and has to stay 2 more days at the police station, they will get a lawyer assigned. But they can also say, "Oh no, I want my own lawyer," but then they have to pay for it themselves. Yes, and the lawyer can, accommodate them with everything, and also assist them in the court hearing or speak for their client. In regards to no, not speaking at all. Don't want to speak to the police. That's the right the suspect has. But if that's the case, then the police has to do more investigation around the suspect to build up the case. So not speaking is not always the best tactic, but that's something he has to discuss with his lawyer. Because sometimes there are situations where everybody wants to know, so what do you have to say about it? Because you were at the crime scene, we saw you on camera with a firearm. And if you don't say anything about it, then you don't say anything in court about it, that also becomes a little strange. And could impact the sentence, maybe.
Yeah.
Because you're not,
Understood. But also, in case of, your investigation that's taking place, someone is held for questioning and then let go, and let's say maybe not even further processed or involved. I guess my question is really why should they be held? Because then that also creates a public condemnation of that person, or in a sense of defamation, because then it's seen as if yes, everyone has that you presume innocent until proven guilty, but once you see at the end of the day, the optics of seeing someone being held in prison or arrested, that comes across very strong. And so why is someone held for questioning? What reason?
Yes, well, arresting someone is really a measure that has a big impact on a person. So you have like an arrest, you have a situation where there's a fight, and people saw someone hitting the other guy, and then the one who was ill-treating the other guy is going to be arrested. So the reason for the arrest is because he's a suspect in the case. He has to be questioned. There has to be investigation has to be done. So the police arrest someone, then the prosecutor also comes into place, and he or she will decide if a person has to be arrested for more days, like 8 days. And after that, the judge after 3 days, every suspect has to see the judge of instruction. So this is another measure to make sure that the process of being arrested was being done in a correct way by the police, and also if there are enough, if it is necessary to investigate this case further. Then that leads to pre-trial detention? Yes, well, that's still the arrest. So the judge after 3 days, then you got in total. That will be 10 days, and after that you get the request for the judge of instruction to the demand to prolong the pre-trial detention. And it can go on until approximately 3.5 months. But within that time, the suspect has to go to court for a court hearing. It can be a preliminary hearing, so it's because the investigation is not fully completed, and then the real court hearing on the next date. But there is always a judge who will evaluate if the arrest or the pretrial detention is still necessary. And if not, a suspect can be released. And also the prosecutor, him or herself, will have to constantly keep in mind if it's still necessary to keep someone in jail or not. And usually the biggest reason is because it's a very serious crime and he has to, we want to demand a jail sentence. Or it's because we have a lot of investigation to do, and when we release a suspect, he will frustrate the investigation, like influence witnesses or make sure that evidence is
tampered.
Yeah, tampered with. So or maybe there's a risk of him reoffending at this time. So we want him to be staying arrested or detained until the court hearing. So these are the biggest reasons for someone to stay in detention. But the lawyer and the suspect can ask the judge of instruction or the judge in the court hearing to suspend or to uplift the pretrial detention for whatever reason they have. And then the judge has to look at it and decide if it's going to be granted or not.
Okay, gotcha. So we just have a few more minutes left, so I think just end off with with 2 questions. The first one being, another thing that we've noticed is where cases tend to take quite a long time sometimes, and especially if it's a high-profile case, but maybe politically related and so forth. But my question is, one, why did it take so long, especially if it is over 3-5 years, and what I'm curious about, what is the office's policy if one was established, if the prosecutor fails to come up with their case in a reasonable time, then doesn't that also contribute to technicalities that could be seen as a miscarriage of justice as well?
The important thing is that during the time the investigation is still going on, so there are new aspects that has to be investigated. There are new witnesses. Sometimes the lawyer has a whole list of witnesses that have to be questioned at the judge of instruction. It all takes time, and finally, at the court hearing, the court has to decide if it has taken too long or not. Maybe the lawyer says, "Okay, it's taken so much time. I think my client." Has to get a lower sentence, or maybe the police wasn't working hard enough. So this has to be consequences in this court. It has to have consequences in the court case, and that's for the court to decide if it's been too long or not. And maybe if it's really been too long, then usually it can lower the sentence. But in big investigation, it's clear for everybody that it's not a case that you can solve like in a couple of months, because you want to do the investigation thorough, and also not only aspects against that evidence that will they have how do you say? Not only the evidence that is working against the suspect, but also the evidence that can relieve the suspect of things. So it's both sides that have to be investigated. And in some cases, like Ford case, etc., it can take a long time. That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So my final question for you would be, in situations of a case not going as expected, what goes into revisiting, that case for trial? Let's say, if you have a situation where all proof points a guilty verdict, but whether through a loophole or technicality, the person you're prosecuting is ruled as innocent, what goes into revisiting your trial in that regard?
You mean during the investigation we don't have enough evidence, or don't come up?
No, I mean after your first court case, and then you expect a win, but that is not what you get. So if you decide to go ahead and appeal, what is your approach in revisiting that trial?
You mean me as a prosecutor at
a
court of appeal, or I don't really understand your question. Like we have a court case, and because it's not like a win or lose situation actually, because as a prosecutor, it's not like the American style of court where you have the prosecutor against the suspect. We have a different kind of court system. So also the prosecutor and the judge are looking for the truth and the evidence in the case. If a prosecutor thinks that this case shouldn't go to court, well, we don't summon the case because we think there's not enough evidence. And sometimes it takes as long as going to court to understand in the court hearing itself that no, I don't have enough evidence to go forward with this. And then we have to demand acquittal ourselves. But it can be, of course, the case that the court thinks a suspect has to be acquitted and we don't think so. And that's why the prosecutor can appeal in a case so that the higher court can decide or can do the investigation all over again, the court investigation, and see what the outcome is of that. And also for the suspect, it's possible to appeal when he thinks that the sentence is too high or he is sentenced for something he hasn't done.
Okay,
in his opinion.
Okay, gotcha. All right, and then slightly on a personal note, and when it comes to the pressures of working a case, especially if it's high profile, in that process, how do you guys separate, being a prosecutor, so having that legal hat from the individual self, in a sense of not being too personally invested? How do you work around that?
Yeah, well, you're a person, so some cases will affect you more than other cases. And in profile cases or very difficult cases, we, talk to our colleagues about it and, to get some of the pressure off. But me personally, I try to not take my cases to my home situation. But there are always cases that will keep going to your mind. But you have to separate that from your personal life because otherwise it gets really hard to handle, and just to keep it on the work floor. And if you have problems in a specific case because it's a really serious crime or a crime that gets to you, you can also decide that it's better that a different prosecutor handles this case because you're not. Maybe you're emotionally attached to something, I don't know. That doesn't happen very often, but there's always a possibility.
No, I got you. In case you have your biases, of course, you be aware of those too.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Could be, but that rarely happens actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And with that, I would like to thank you so much, Ms. Whitfield.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being on the program and just sharing the information that you did. And with that, to our viewers and listeners, thank you guys as well for tuning in. And you can also check out this interview later on if you would like to revisit certain points on YouTube. Just go YouTube Ralph Kintav, and you can catch this along with all the other interviews that we've done as well. So with that, do take care and be sure to tune in again tomorrow. All right.